In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Please be seated. So Jesus is walking by the Sea of Galilee, and he's thinking about his ministry. He's thinking about how he grew up. He's thinking about the stories that his mom and his stepdad Joseph told him about who he was. Probably spent a lot of time coping with that, thinking about his childhood in Egypt, where they had to run as refugees because the local king, Herod, a Greek king, by the way, the descendant of one of Alexander the Great's generals, not a Jewish king, just the guy in charge, and how he had conspired to, frankly, find a way to find Jesus and kill him, because he probably said, Mom, if we're Jewish, why are we growing up in Egypt? And so she told him. And then he had come back and grown up in Galilee of the Gentiles. Again, the same question, if we're Jewish, why are we living among the Gentiles? Well, because somebody back home wanted to kill us. So, you do what you need to do. You wind up where you need to wind up, and sometimes you think it's your choice. But often it's just in reaction to world events, or you got laid off, or you found a better job, or you met a girl, or you met a guy, or you found a house, or whatever it was. And you just kind of wind up there. And you start, and you hope that this word, this gift, this skill that God has placed on your heart, and that maybe your parents told you about when you were growing up, or some blessed elder, some coach, some school teacher, some senior warden said you could be senior warden too. No, I'll go to another church. And there you are. And you start. And I think that's how Jesus was. So he's walking by the shore of the sea, far away from the holy temple in Jerusalem, where holy people are supposed to be and holy disciples grow up. He's away from all of it. Zebulun, Naphtali on the shore of the sea were the people who sat in darkness. So you're surrounded by people, not just those who are walking through darkness, but they sit there. They spend a lot of time in the darkness. So if you feel that way, in this world, you have a lot in common with a lot of people going all the way back. And perhaps one reason why God spends time with us wherever we end up is because that's how God can spend some time with the people that we meet, if we remember that we have those gifts that are fruitful wherever we happen to be, or in your case, whatever time we happen to be in, this relatively long, frankly, in-between time that'll take, a little while, probably around a year, who knows. And it'll be a time to sort of get to know yourselves again, both in the context of how Christ comes to you in particular, and also just who you are, as in terms of job and family and age group, and whether you're in kindergarten or you wish you were back in kindergarten. So he's walking by the sea, and he sees these fishermen, and maybe he says, well, let's see if this works, this preaching stuff. And so he yells, come and follow me. And to his surprise, perhaps they do. Or to their surprise, because they're doing their job, fishing, or in one of our cases, doing their job as an accountant or running a hardware store, or being involved in the community or the family, or just sitting in third grade and hoping nobody calls on you. Sorry about that. And they hear this voice, and it grabs at their heart, because they didn't expect it, because they weren't being holy people, and they weren't being holy disciples, and they weren't in the temple, and they weren't in church. They were just doing their job, being in third grade, hardware store, law, the arts, driving, cleaning 17A. I don't know. And this voice, these words grab at you. And maybe in our cases, it's a word that we heard in church, the previous Sunday. Or it's the word of a beloved elder, that coach or that teacher or whoever it was years and years ago, and it just sticks with us. And maybe that's the case first with James and John, and then first with Peter and Andrew, and then with James and John. And much to their surprise, and much to their father's surprise, who now has to manage this boat all by himself, they follow him. It doesn't say that either Zebedee or the other dad put up much of a fight, so maybe they were glad that the kids found the direction and had the imagination to take their own path. Nothing wrong with the dad's path, but everybody wants people to discover their hearts and just have the imagination not to think outside the box, but in this case to think outside the boat, and head off that way. And then a lovely thing happens, because Jesus says, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." So I will make you, we will spend some time together, I will apprentice you, you will walk with me. He doesn't just say, "Go fish for people," he says, "Follow me, and I will make you." So we will spend some time together, and I think that's what we do in church, is we apprentice ourselves to Jesus. And we kind of learn what the heavenly kingdom, what the beloved community feels like. Because we sit here and maybe our minds wander and maybe they don't, but we sort of know that we're comfy on these lovely pews. And we know that whatever our age group and whatever we've done the week before, whether it's sin or salvation, at some point we get called up and we get to kneel beside, tall people and short people and people who've done all kinds of things in their lives, and next to a child, next to an adult, an older adult. And we know that they are welcome. I had this vision, became very clear to me, how the church can become a part of the healing of society. One Sunday morning, I was in Harlem pretty early. I was coming from a prayer group, actually, and I ducked into the big Roman Catholic church. It's probably the biggest Roman Catholic church in the diocese, about 2,000 people. And I ducked into the early service because I wanted, communion. And I figured if I was quiet, they wouldn't know I wasn't a Roman Catholic. And it was the early service. I have to tell a joke. Some Romans were coming out of Corpus Christi, which is a very high-class Roman Catholic church on the Upper West Side. And one was heard to say to the other, "They are so tasteful, they must think they're Episcopalians." So word went out. But what I noticed there at St. Charles Borromeo at that early service is people of every race and however they dressed and so on. They all came up to communion, and they all faced the same God. And what they were attracted to was Jesus, the guy on the cross, who was there for all of them. And because of that, they wound up being next to each other. God has a great big adoptive family. And so we're called to love God first, and we look around and we realize that we have kind of wound up with a lot of very different people. And if we all love God, then we simply have to take the next step of loving each other too, because that's the only way we get to be up close to God, is if we sort of decide we have to hang out with our brothers and sisters as well. And so that's what happens with those fisher folk. And the other neat thing is they don't leave behind their fishing identity, because Jesus says, "I will make you fish for people." So in this marvelous way, he uses their own categories to teach them. He doesn't say you have to go to Sunday school and seminary before you can understand what I'm trying to tell you. He doesn't say you have to spend a lot of time in prayer on your knees before your heart is ready. He uses their categories. I will make you fish for people so they can understand him right away. So if you understand the call of Christ through your own categories and in your own context, whether it's playing on the playground or making more copies on the copy or balancing somebody else's books or working in a store, whatever, that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. God becomes incarnate in our own native soil, in our own native hearts, in our own native jobs. And even in those places where we grew up, which was, in darkness, far away from where holiness used to be. And maybe some of you grew up in that circumstance where there was times where you felt you were totally cut off. You were totally in darkness. And you didn't even think it was possible to be in the light. And then somehow somebody who'd been displaced by mistake spoke a word to you, like the guy was saying, my friend, the Franciscan who was in a bar, and somebody else sat down next to him and said a word that grabbed his heart. He thought, oh shoot, Jesus caught up with me. That may be the case. And then you follow from there, and you find yourself here in this beloved community, this place that is like every place, in every congregation of any kind, trying to approximate beloved community. And you bring those memories with you so that you can then walk in the direction of the guy on the cross and heal and love others. You all have come from different backgrounds. You all were brought in by different rectors, and Paul refers to that. He says, I hear from Chloe's people, in other words, Chloe's a teacher's pet, and she has written to Paul, that you all are saying some are Apollos, and some are Paul, and some are Cephas, and some are Jim, and some are Scott. And he says, I want you to agree, but he doesn't say the word that it's all got to be one thing. His Greek word for agreement is the word for like mending. So it's like you came in different pathways, different parts of a fishing net, and it's just a case of doing the work to come together, like this. Knit together. Come together through, I was actually going to say this, through different doors, but you sit in the same pews with the same beloved ones from different backgrounds, pointing towards the cause and the mission of Christ, which is to remember that we come to the cross of Christ primarily because we're broken, because we're forced to our knees, because we have no other idea of a way forward, and Christ has met us there in that darkness and asked us to work on those needs and on those vulnerabilities, because when we do that, we will be prepared for the purpose of Christ, as the letter of Paul says, which is to bring his healing to every other person, wherever they are, wherever we wind up, wherever they wind up, and to share the love of God with them like sort of the Eucharistic love in our hearts in those times and places, in this particular time and place for Christ Church Warwick, and for whoever will show up here this year, and whoever you will show up for in those jobs in hardware stores and legal firms and schoolyards and wherever you wind up. Amen.